There's plenty of forgiveness. I hate to admit it. I won't ever admit it. I'll talk to you outside of the office when I admit it, right?
Welcome back to the Culture and Legacy podcast, where we're having candid conversations with entrepreneurs talking about life behind the scenes. I am the host of the podcast, Matthew Reed, and today I am excited to have two of my good friends, David and Joe Kampert, on the podcast with me today. Hey guys, what's going on?
Hey Matthew, what's going on? How you doing today?
Doing all right. So excited to
doing
have
good.
you guys on. Joe, what's up?
It's going good, man. glad to be on. Thank you so much for having us, man.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining me on. And so for people who don't know what you guys do and kind of your relationship to each other, if it isn't obvious, why don't you tell the people who are listening and watching kind of who you guys are, what you do, and just, those fun things about it.
Yeah. So Joe and I, we run an insurance brokerage together. So we opened up about 2 years ago, and we're in office together. We've got some other employees with us, but we definitely work in close proximity with each other. So I kind of handle the operational side of things, and Joe is our vice president of sales. So he really focuses on sales and training for all the other reps that we have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so definitely that's where we balanced each other out. Pops is kind of that grandmaster overview, and then I'm kind of just in the day-to-day and helping training and getting people up off the ground, getting sales on the board.
Cool. So you guys found, as father and son, you found a way to make it work, right? Yeah,
I would say so.
No, I think we definitely have. I think I look forward to going to work every day to be able to see my son every single day at work has really been a huge blessing. And I think one of the biggest pieces of that is that we're very different. And I think that's one of the reasons why it works, because things that I love to do, Joe doesn't. He doesn't care so much to do those things, and stuff that I don't like to do or is hard for me to do, Joe is really good. And so I think our strengths really play off of each other very well, so that we're not kind of stepping over each other doing the same thing. We really like doing different things, and so I think together we are able, I think, to function a lot stronger than we would as individuals.
Yeah, and personally for me too, it's just been great because I'm still young and learning and hungry and just always wanting to learn something new every day.
Yeah.
Obviously, Pops has been around the industry way longer than I have. Even if I've gotten my toes wet, it's been great to not maybe feel that full stress or I wouldn't call it a burden, but quote unquote burden of just running a business and handling those operations side of things. But it's also been a blessing to be able to see that from a perspective to where, obviously down the road, I would be able to do so myself. So it's been awesome.
Yeah, that's cool. And so I want to, just really dive in on kind of, obviously you guys are in business together, but I'm sure that there have been some beautiful moments as well as also some ugly moments. And so before we get into that, why don't we kind of share, or why don't you share where this started from, where the heart of one, being an entrepreneur, and two, doing this together as a father son, why do you feel like it's important to, to do this together?
Yeah. I'll start out with that. I think this really started, as Joe mentioned, I've been in the insurance industry for quite a long time. I started with State Farm right out of college. And so I've always kind of been on the corporate side of things. And in my most recent position before we opened the agency, I was managing all state agents in St. Louis. And one of the difficult things was always trying to get those guys to do what I wanted them to do, and not really having control over what my income was, what my success was. I was always having to depend on others to do that.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, I want to do it myself. I want to be able to start something where, hey, if I want to work till 8 or 9 or 10 o'clock at night, I can do that, and those efforts are directly related to my success and what I'm able to accomplish. And so I think that was a big reason that got me thinking about really starting something new, running and having my own business. Now, at the same time that we were doing that, Joe, my son, was working as a producer or as a staff person for another agency. And he really started kind of having that same stirring in him, thinking, you know what, I'm seeing other people do this, and I'm just, getting paid an hourly rate or a commission. Man, what if I could actually have something for myself, or really have something for, on my own? And I think that's really what got the two of us thinking, man, why don't we do this together? Let's really build something that the two of us can benefit from. And obviously Joe can take it a lot further than I can take it, but let's come together and, I think really make that happen.
Well, it's funny too, because now that I'm even just thinking of it in hindsight now, it's like we were indirectly working together then, because where I was a staff person I was actually within within his market. So as like whatever I was doing in the office and the sales and everything, it's he was basically our manager. He was our boss. So it's kind of funny. I had never even really thought back to that, but it's like, we kind of started that even back then, even though we weren't.
So you kind of experiencing, David, you're talking about, so I guess one thing is working with somebody who's really invested into the business. And it's not just like, working for somebody else. And so it doesn't matter whether you're putting in 40 hours or 80 hours, you get paid the same for the most part, but somebody up above you is getting a big chunk. And and then now that it's like, this is you, it's like, okay, I can work as hard or as little, but your work pretty much determines what you bring home. And so now to have somebody who's completely invested into that, because your family just kind of makes that tenfold. Just really pays off.
It's huge. It really is. I mean, it's huge. And and I see that in Joe. And when I look at his investment in the business as I'll say, quote unquote, an employee, it is way further than anybody else that we have, working for us. And I think that's something that we always kind of have in mind. And even for myself, I think my motivation would be really different if I were having to work at something literally, I'm 51 years old, so I'm not a 20 something. I'm not going to be doing this for the next 30 years. So to think about all this effort that I'm putting into getting something up off the ground, only to have to sell it to somebody else. It would make it that much more difficult. But now all I think about is, hey, I want to create 100-year agency. When I see these agencies that have been around forever, and now there's a real possibility for that to happen. Why? Because my son, I don't have to convince someone to get into the business at some point to take it over. He's already there. And I'm already seeing how well he's doing with it. So it just gives me this peace of mind that, man, let me continue really building something that, man, it's going to be his, and I know it's going to be in great hands when we make that transition.
I see.
Yeah, for sure. And that's, I even to speak to that too is, it makes it 1,000 times easier, even though, and like right now, like I don't take a salary or anything like that. I know a lot of people that would be in my position now within an agency would be asking for this, and this, but it's like, I also want to have that mindset of, for something for my daughter or for my grandkids, and just having that, I really put a lot of it into the agency because I really believe in what we have going. And it makes it easier when, even though I am the employee, it really is more of it feels like a partnership is how I'm treated. Everything's 100% transparent. So it makes it 1,000 times easier versus like some boss who's just sitting there micromanaging you. And that's kind of how, what we both come from. So it's been awesome.
So your dad's not a micromanager? That's what
No, he is not.
And if he was, you could be honest and tell him,
Yeah,
and
right.
not fear
that would be one of those bad moments. Probably one of those not so pretty moments
Yeah.
if I was micromanaging Joe. And I think honestly that's one of Joe's strengths. One of Joe's strengths is that hey, he is an independent thinker, and I think that's what because we come from two different generations, we think differently about things.
Yeah.
We approach
That's a
things
plus.
very
Yeah.
differently, right? But
Mhm.
it's a huge plus. Now,
Mhm.
do we argue about stuff? Yeah, occasionally we do. But a lot of times we're bringing two very different perspectives, and to me, it's the blending of those things. I think the byproduct of that, what we end up with, is something that's multi-generational as far as our
Yeah.
approach and process and how we do business. Because Joe's thinking about people his age, and I'm thinking about people my age, and we're trying to build something that appeals to not just really one segment, but to multiple segments. And to me, that is a huge advantage. So that I'm not trying to guess how we should do things, but Joe's really offering that perspective firsthand.
Yeah, that's good. And that's something that because David, when you started this, and if you're just looking for just any partner, you're probably looking for somebody that's more like-minded, or someone that you have maybe some more experience working with. So you're looking for someone more closer to your age, because that's just what you're not going to
Right.
just hire any millennial or Gen Z off the street. But then Joe, is coming in, and he's bringing that perspective, but him, his work ethic, his heart. And so I feel that. And
Yeah.
so there's something else that you really touched on, and even Joe, you kind of touched on this as well. And this is really big for the Culture and Legacy podcast, is really this emphasis on the legacy piece.
Mm-hmm.
And so David, you talked a lot about having something that building 100-year business, already admitting and acknowledging that this is going to last past me, or I want it to last past me.
Right.
And even
right.
Joe, you want this to last past you. And so can you guys talk about like what that means to have something that you can hand off to your child?
Yeah. I think for me right now, it helps me be more of a forward thinker and a future thinker versus really just trying to create something now and thinking about how can I maximize this to maybe take the most money out of it now, et cetera, et cetera. Where I think when you're not looking at something in terms of legacy, I think the business becomes very self-centered, I think.
Oh, that's big. Yeah.
And so with that legacy mindset, I'm always thinking to the future, and I'm always thinking of what I'm leaving behind. And so what I'm trying to build and what I'm trying to put in place is not really for this very short-term benefit, and that's the challenge, because you're giving up some short-term benefit for long-term gain. I think there's always that trade-off. So it's trying to find that balance where, hey, I want benefits. I'm running this business, I'm putting my time into it, and so you want to get something out of it. But at the same time, I don't want to strip this thing down so that by the time my son gets it, there's a shell that's left of a business, and so now it's, so I'm always thinking about the health of the business and what I'm able to give to him so that he can really have success. Maybe, and I would say even more so than I've had. I would hope that we position the agency and the business in such a way that when he's able to take over, the things that we've put in place, he can really build upon and take it to even much higher heights and greater places than we ever did when the two of us were together.
Well,
That's good.
Don't forget the best part, man, is when you retire, I got you on a nice paycheck every month. But in all seriousness, right? So I obviously my daughter turns 1 this month.
Already? Wow.
Yeah.
Already, man, it's
1
crazy.
year old. Jeez.
Talking, crawling. She's huge. It's
Talking
been
back?
crazy. Yeah, right. Not yet. Not yet. But really that, so obviously I have that mindset of really just wanting, now I have that. That just happens when you become a father, and it's like that child is now obviously I want everything for her. But then you also got to think too, it's like, don't forget how you got to where you are. I didn't always used to be this way. And Dad can attest to that, right? But I also am in debt to him and to my mom, right? Because they are who raised me, and for better or for worse, obviously I think right now it's, for the better. I ended out all right, but it's also to take care of them. Is that, I'm being blessed with what could potentially be, a forever business, something that could be passed down for generations, and that started with Dad. So that is a big piece for me too. Is that when it's left in my hands, you always got to pay it forward. Don't forget, where you came from and who got you there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a big part of entrepreneurship, or really anything that we learn, is, having somebody to reach up to that's willing to take you along, but also having a hand behind you where you can bring somebody else up with you as well. In this case, you guys are fortunate where it's father, son, and then daughter. For other people may not have that kind of perspective, but I still think that, even as an individual, what we're doing will mean so much when we've impacted other people by helping them bring up. You may help somebody, outside of insurance, building an insurance company. They may have other kind of business, but I think, the things that you're learning, these lessons that you're learning from being a forward thinker, and by wanting to still give back to people that have given so much, will last and travels beyond just one kind of company. That's any company kind of advice. I'm taking it in myself.
Yeah. And I think that's absolutely true. And I think one of the other benefits of doing it with family is that, I know Joe. I know what I'm getting. And here's the other part of this. I think if you know that your son or daughter's not going to be a fit, then you can't force that. I've seen Joe sell barbecue when he was like 11 years old at a farmer's market, walking around with samples so he could get that $20 bonus,
How
after
often
4 hours.
How often you get free these days? That was the kicker.
So I mean, his mentality and how, just as a salesperson, I knew that he was going to be successful at this, and I because I've seen him be successful in other things that he's been doing. So I think from a family standpoint, sometimes family members just get into the business because they're family, and I think you really have to you really have to think about, okay, am I doing this person a disservice by bringing them into a position that they're not really well suited for, but we're trying to force it and make it work so that maybe because I need to give him a job so that he has a job. And that's not what this was about. I mean, this was like, Joe, I need you. I recognize your talents. I see your skills and your successes for everybody else. Man, let's do that together. And then I think let's exponentially, increase what we can do together.
Yeah. So even if Joe wasn't a killer salesman, or even if he wasn't your blood, he was still a killer salesman, and so you want to bring him along because that's something.
Absolutely. And when you're hiring employees, you're not ever really quite sure what you're going to get because people are telling you what you want to hear, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think one of the great things about family is, hey, I've lived with Joe for 20 plus years, so I know what I'm getting. I know his strengths, I know his weaknesses. And that's a good thing. I think part of going into business is really just knowing what you've got. And as a leader, then being able to create an environment where that person can really, truly be successful. And that's what we're trying to do. We're still trying to work out those kinks. We've talked about all the good things, but there's been times, where we've lost our cool with each other. And, it's always kind of awkward in the office when, everybody else is there and it's kind of like, here's father and son and we're just going at it, because it's family, and, you know how family is. But fortunately that is few and far between.
That's one thing to keep in mind too, is that when you're getting into business with somebody, something on the front lines is accountability. So if I'm slacking, right, and especially because Pops knows me, so he knows when I'm slacking, and if I'm asking for that accountability, which you do within a business with, and you're trying to grow and everything, especially within family, you have to know right before you get in that, are you okay with being held accountable by your parent? Right. And so that's like, you got to swallow your pride. And it's like, this isn't just dad, right? This is also who you do business with. So that was something too. I mean, it is a little bit different. But at the end of the day, it's like, you got to be able to kind of filter that, where it's
Yeah.
like, hey, he's not just my dad, trying to coach me up. It's like, no, like we're doing business together, and we have to be able to filter that.
Joe, do you ever have those moments where you're like, okay, am I talking to my dad, or am I talking to business dad?
Yeah, if I'm questioning that, then we probably lost it. It's been blurred. Like,
That's when we've had one of those blurry moments, and he's like,
Yeah.
"Okay, all right,
it's like, wait,
we
is
got to
this
talk about this."
business or are we just getting after it? Yeah.
So let's go into that more. What are kind of so I feel like we talk a lot about the wins, or the what's beneficial to going into business together as family. What about some of those things that are pretty hard, those ugly moments, things that are kind of difficult? That's like, not that you hate each other, but it's like, man, this is a challenge. If you are going into business with your son, with your daughter, or any family member, you got to keep this thing in mind.
Yeah. I think, Joe mentioned accountability, and I'll tell you, I'll just be honest. The hardest thing for me is that accountability flows both ways. So when your son starts calling you out because you're not doing what you need to be doing,
Yeah.
like, man, it's just hard to hear. And Joe mentioned swallowing his pride as a father, and you think, look, I've been doing this business 20 years, or at least in some form or fashion of it. Like, who are you to tell me that I'm not doing this and this and this?
Mm-hmm.
So you really have to have a sense of humility, and I think it requires a maturity in your relationship that I think you two have to almost kind of have an agreement to say, look, you know what? I know your heart. I know where what you're saying is coming from. And so because I know that, I'm going to be able, I'm going to receive that. I'm going to try to hear it. And you may not say it the best way. You may be saying it out of emotion because Joe cares as much as I do about the business. And we're not perfect, So yeah, there's times when I'm struggling and I'm not doing what I should be doing. And so I really try to open myself up to say, Joe, I hope you would say something to me. If you see me not doing this or not doing that, or you need more of this from me, whether it be as a leader, as a boss, whatever, that he would feel the freedom to do that. Like, I can't really say that to my dad. Now I know he holds back some because because I think I am dad, and he's deferring. Like, okay, I think dad's going to come around here, but that's tough. I mean, it's tough hearing it from your son when you've always been the one that's kind of the authority figure and kind of speaking down. Now when that speak starts coming up, you got to be able to receive that, and that's tough sometimes.
I would say, we touched on it a little bit earlier, just the generational perspective, right? Obviously, we're from two very different times. Granted, I mean, I think the way I was raised, it's a little bit different than your typical millennial. I've had a paper. I've been working since I was in like second grade. I had a paper out, and then I worked at the farmer's market. So I think my entitlement is maybe a little bit less than what we maybe see against your typical millennial, right? And I don't even really like saying that. But
Millennials don't
for
like labels. That's what it is.
right.
Don't put me in a box, man.
Yeah, right. Guess that means I'm a millennial, right?
Yeah.
But I guess for me too, it can be that perspective. Is that, yeah, eventually, and we said it's like we'll have the blended, generational segment that can, reach a bunch of people versus maybe just one or the other. But it doesn't always just happen like that. Like for me, I'll have a vision that is very outward. For the most part, it's normally I'm going too quick, but that's because I'm going. Whereas then when you have the experience and the wisdom coming from somebody who has done it for 20 years, that forward motion is going to either look different or maybe not be at the pace that I want it to be at. But that again just comes back to we have to be able to find that place in the middle. But those I feel like have been some challenges where it's like, hey, I want to hire 3 new people and let's get these sales up on the board. And it's like, whoa. We need to look at really the long haul of like, hey, here's the expense behind this, whether that's payroll or even just time lost for training, onboarding, everything like that. And sometimes I will overlook that just because I want to go. So I think we have had that, but it really, to me, it's a generational perspective. Is he's been there, done that. I'm trying to do it, and I just need to be able to listen to somebody who's probably been there, done that.
Yeah. So, Joe, what is it like to then make a mistake, right? Because you may be like the you're kind of the young gun, like you're just like, oh, I see it, I'm gonna go get it, and not really, like you said, not really thinking about those other things. And so you may, I guess I could ask it this way, do you feel like there's more, I guess, forgiveness because it's your dad, or do you feel like it's even just difficult to admit that mistake, or I guess, what is it like to?
There's plenty of forgiveness. I hate to admit it. I won't ever admit it. I'll talk to you outside of the office when I admit it, right? No, that is tough for me, and I'm still right. I'm still learning, and figuring it out. And again, like Pop said, we're not perfect, so. But I would say the forgiveness is extended, but I don't like to be wrong, so I'll try and find any and everything to try and prove me right. But yeah, I would say that's more just my hard-headedness, not that the olive branch hadn't been extended.
And you got it from somebody, right? So you inherited
it.
Right?
True. It's for mom, right, Dad?
I
think
mom. I think it's important. One of the things is someone has to have the final say, and that and I think in a final, we had a situation where we were interviewing someone to hire, and Joe was all about he's like, man, this person is the next rock star. They're going to be amazing.
Perfect.
And I was not seeing it at all. I mean, there were just multiple red flags for me. And we got in a very heated conversation about it because to him, he's passionate about what he thinks. And I'm passionate about no, we can't hire another wrong person. We can't do that. It's when you're a small business, I mean, it is a huge cost when you make a mistake from a hiring standpoint and you lose that 3 to 6 or 9 months. And now you're literally having to start over again. I knew we could not do that. And there were so many red flags. And I finally just, and it's almost, you feel in some ways like you're playing the dad card. But it's really about, at some point, you can only have one chief, and I just have to say, okay, you know what? I'm making this decision and this is on me. And if I tell you what, if it goes south or if it doesn't work out, I'll take the blame for it. But you know what? I'm not seeing this and we're not doing it. End of conversation. And then you got to go home and be a family. And you're just shutting him down at work, and then all of a sudden it's like, we close the door and get in the car and go home. Okay, so how's that gonna work? How's that gonna play out? Dad just shut me down, like he doesn't think I know what I'm talking about, or I don't, or I see this or that, and it's literally just differences of opinion. But at some point you have to say, okay, who's the final authority? So whoever that person is, and maybe in some cases it might be the son that's the boss, and maybe the dad is working with the son in more of a, the son's the CEO or whatever, or owner of the company. So whatever that is, there can only be one chief. So you really almost can't even have, both of you can't run I think it's difficult to run it both at the same time, because at some point you're going to agree to disagree. And then someone has to make the call, and whoever has responsibility for that got to do it.
Well, and that's what I mean. At the end of the day, right? It's like that comes. We talked about it briefly earlier. It's just you're being prepared. It's like you gotta put that in the foundation of the business. Like when you're getting into it, especially because we did start it together from the ground up versus maybe one or the other coming into it after it already started. So that was something that I think we had to. And again, that's something that there's a reason I'm the VP. I'm not the owner, president, right? I still am being outranked, and that you have to be able to swallow that, and that needs to be the look. If it comes to this point, then this is the line, and then once that line is drawn, you have to respect that line, and then life goes on. So
so at the end of the day, right? It's still a business, and you both. Because you're both super invested into this and you want this to last beyond you, this thing needs to succeed. And for it to succeed, like we have to put these things in place, treat it like a business. Like for this moment, we're not family. I mean, you're still family, but it's like we can't view this from the perspective of family, because if we do, then like you said earlier, people are going to get hurt, because people are going to get bit, because they're putting those emotions before these business things. And there is a time and a place for that. And so this, I'm curious about this. I want to ask you guys, what is your life, or what does your relationship look like outside of business? Once you do lock the doors and you go home, what is your relationship and look outside of work?
I think it's really good. We talk a lot of shop, outside the walls of the business. And in fact, sometimes it's almost hard to turn it off, because with social media these days, business doesn't really ever stop.
Yeah, especially when it's your own.
Yeah, and when it's your own. So people are contacting us literally throughout the night. So we're always in contact about that, really once we leave. So it's pretty difficult to do that, to turn it off. But sometimes that's what you need to do. Sometimes it's awkward. Like if you've had a fight or if you've had something, you have to be able to reconcile things, and sometimes, forgiveness is huge, or not forgiveness, but just to say acceptance. Maybe you didn't do anything wrong, so there's nothing to forgive, but you've got to accept that choice or that decision, and then you just got to move on from it, and it's not the end of the world. So many choices, sometimes they feel like a big deal in the moment, but they're not. It's not whether the business is going to live or die. It's really just these small things. And sometimes we get, again, the emotions make it much bigger than it is. So we just have to be able to let that stuff go, because if you don't, then you end up getting home or you're outside of work, and now all of a sudden you've got this awkwardness or this residue, if you will, of something that's kind of left undealt with. And again, that's another great thing about Joe. Joe does not allow that stuff to sit. In my personality, like my family's, I'll sweep it under the rug, and there'll be a huge lump. We'll be tripping over that rug. For me, and Joe's trying to lift that thing up and get under there and see what's in there.
Yeah,
and it's a huge blessing for me, because he's like, Dad, all right, we got to talk about this.
I'm pretty direct. Yeah, like if something happens, like I don't really let it go long. The only length I'll let it go is maybe for us to cool off a little bit, and then it's like, boom, right back to it. And that, I mean, our relationship my entire life. I mean, Pops has always been my coach for all my teams. We've always been super close, and even more so now, right? I mean, we spend pretty much all day together. And then he's involved with my daughter, and it's his grandbaby, and but really our relationship has, I would almost say that it's been strengthened by how we've been able to operate within the business. Because really, when you look at it, it's like, man, we actually probably spend more time together in the business than we do outside of it, right? It just starts to kind of blend together when you do everything together. But yeah, I really think that business has solidified, our relationship, and it obviously is still growing.
Yeah, that reminds me of when my wife and I were wedding planning years ago, and there's this piece of advice that it wasn't an advice that someone told me. I was eavesdropping on someone else's advice, but I claimed it for my own. But they said, obviously there's a lot of wedding planning, and it's hard to just like not talk about wedding planning. And kind of the advice that was shared was to go on a date and not talk about wedding planning, because you don't want that when you get married, that you're married and you're good wedding planners, right? You want to be married and then you're still good friends. And I feel like, that same thing applies to business. Now we're both entrepreneurs, not in the same business, but still it's like, okay, we need to have some time where we're not talking about business, because our relationship, our marriage, your father-son relationship is, at the end of the day, more important than business itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right. And here's another point I'll make around that too, Matthew. And that is, if you have other children that are not in the business, then like that's something I've really been wrestling with recently, is about really making sure that I'm connecting with my other son who doesn't live here. He's not in the same city. So here I am. I mean, Joe and I are spending all this time together, and our relationship is, I mean, obviously it's being strengthened and grown. Why? But just because of the proximity and time that we're investing in it. And my other son has got none of that. So I think you have to be careful that, as a father, son, or whatever family relationship, for those family members that are not in the business, particularly if it's, parent to child, you have to be super intentional outside of business to make sure that you're investing in them as much as, and it's hard to be as much just because of time's sake for the business, but you need to be investing in them as well so that your relationship with them is coming along and not feeling extremely one-sided, with your one child, and your other children are not getting near as much of you because it's all about the business and the one that you're with.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, we are closing. What kind of word is that? We are nearing the end of the episode. And so I want to ask each of you, to answer this question the best way you can, but what is the legacy that you want to leave?
Wow, that's a great question. The legacy that I want to leave. I think that for me, the legacy that I want to leave is that, I don't know, a couple things the first thing that really comes to mind is foundation builder. That, I helped build something that was sustainable, that was able to really, I think live past me. But also when I think of building, I also think of, I want to be someone that helped my employees or the people that worked for me build their own lives. What working for Redwood is just what they get to do. It's not necessarily who they are. And so, we try to help our employees really kind of build themselves, or really try to figure out what their vision, what their dreams are, those kinds of things. And so from a legacy standpoint, I hope that we were a place that didn't make it harder for people to do those things, but that we actually enabled people. We enabled them, we helped them, that because they worked at Redwood or because they've had some experience with our agency, they somehow were able to do that more easily than they would have otherwise.
That's cool. That's very cool.
I'd say mine, probably first thing that comes to mind is really, so it's multi-generational, multi-line. And when I say multi-line, not just Kampert bloodline, right? Anybody that is a part of the Redwood organization, whether you're a producer, whether you're an agent, whether you're a customer service rep, whatever it is, I want it to be a multi-generational, multi-line piece of financial freedom. So I think really, a lot of people don't talk about it, and I think money obviously makes the world go round. I think we've seen that even more recently than ever. But I want that for my family, so that, and even this is kind of part of it, is like, even if you don't want to be, like, if Laura didn't want to be a part of Redwood or whatever that might be, I want her to have the ability to do what she is being called to do, what her heart is leading her to do. But then also the multi-line piece is that Redwood, there would still be some place that I could walk into, even if Laura didn't take it over, because I know that we've built it so much so within. Like, my best friend from college has been with us from day one. I want him with us, and down his path and whatever he's doing in life. Like, I always want Redwood to build him up. So yeah, I really just, the benefit of everyone that even touches Redwood. Like, I want those branches to be forever long, right? It's, yeah.
That's a cool illustration, just in the name Redwood Agency and just what it can, really represent, is stretching out. And it's cool to hear that both of you guys are really about empowering other people. Like, it's not just about building up myself and making more and more money, but it's, if we could touch the lives, whether it's people in my family or people who we just come into contact with, those are the people that you want to feel empowered and to go and do their own thing.
And it empowers yourself through that too. Yeah. And that's the best part.
That's cool.
Building up together, all together, being together on top of the mountain versus just being alone. You're going to choose it with all your friends and family versus just being yourself up there.
Yeah. That's very cool. Cool. Well, guys, I appreciate you guys for joining me on the podcast. For people who want to connect with you and just see what you guys are about, where can people find you?
So lots of different places to find us. You can find us on the web at redwoodagencygroup.com. That's redwoodagencygroup.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram at that same thing. If you just search Redwood Agency Group, you'll find us. We're in a lot of different places. Yeah, it shouldn't be hard. So if it is, we're not doing something right. But we've tried to make that pretty easy. So yeah, you should be able to find us in all those places.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Very cool. Well, thank you again, guys, for joining. I think this is going to be very helpful for people who are thinking about, going into business with their child or with their parents or even with the spouse. These are really some good things to really consider and think about before you sign on that dotted line, because it's not all peachy. It's not all beautiful. There are some ugly moments, but if the family element is strong, then you can overcome those business struggles as well.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool.
And thanks for giving us a forum, to be able just to kind of talk through this with you guys. And like you said, hopefully we can help somebody else, if they're trying to make that decision. And hey, I'd even throw out, hey, if you want to talk to us when you hear this podcast and, reach out to us at Redwood, we'd be more than happy to, even offer additional insight or something if there's something specifically you want to talk to us about.
Yeah, that's good. I know I've texted Joe a few times like, yo, I'm about to sign up for this thing. Should I be sketched out or whatever? And I ended up not signing up for it because it didn't sit right. But anyways, yeah, that's good. Yeah, reach out to Redwood if you have some insurance questions or you need to get yourself together and lined up. They've been super helpful for a lot of people that I know. So cool.
Awesome. Thanks, Matthew.
Thank you, guys. Absolutely.
You're awesome, dude. I love what you're doing, man.
Yeah,
great.
Good stuff.
Wouldn't be anything without people like you. So I appreciate you guys very much. And if you are listening or watching this podcast, however you are consuming this content, be sure to subscribe. Check out the notes below that's going to be linked out to connect with Joe and David through this. And so thank you all very much, and catch you guys in the next episode. Peace.